being said in this code word, citizenship. So when people say we are all citizens of Egypt, they mean whether I'm a Copt or whether I'm a Salafi, whether I'm a Muslim Brotherhood, whether I'm a man or a woman, we are all equal citizens of Egypt. Now that we are all equal because we are citizens, we need to have a state, a constitution, and a law that reflects this inherent equality which we are assuming exists in the state. So to me, from a philosophical point of view, it is putting the cart in front of the horse, but the fact that everybody is participating in it is so fascinating that people want equality. And they find that they cannot talk about it in the language of Islam. That is the most fascinating part. The reason why the Muslim Brotherhood and, in the case of Tunisia, the Nahda Party and others are participating in this language is because they do not have to feel the pressure to defend the equality of citizenship. Because once you start coming from Islamic sources, then it becomes difficult to justify the equality of genders and also equality against religion, at least given the context in which they are operating. In spite of the language of Dawlah Madaniyyah in the preamble of the Tunisian constitution, the only document which is so far sort of coherent and you can actually access, the language about women is already being challenged. And very clearly men have been privileged and women are supposed to be complementary to men. So women in Tunisia are objecting to this language. Why would women be complementary to men? They are all equal. So to me, that is an interesting challenge. But what I'm also seeing is that finally Islamic political thought is moving very rapidly forward. Until now, it was merely theoretical. People in conferences like this in non-Muslim countries were debating what an Islamic democracy is and what to do about it, how to justify allowing a participatory political system where religious values can be practiced. But now this concept of Dawlah Madaniyyah has at least opened the space for us to talk about it. And the positive aspect of this is that the traditional challenges that we felt in the context of conversations about the role of Sharia in public politics are taken for granted, which is equality of all citizens. That is the most positive thing that I think is coming out of the discussions in the Arab world. For the Islamists, there is an interesting challenge. They have to challenge their advocacy of the Sharia with their simultaneous advocacy of democracy. So they find themselves in a position where they have to assert the compatibility of Islam and democracy. Because if they are seen as anti-democratic, then their legitimacy internationally is challenged. So in trying to balance both domestic legitimacy and international legitimacy, they're also seeking to balance their dual advocacy, one for Islamic State and the other is for a democracy. In the minds of some of them, clearly there is no difference. That if you have a democratic society where majority of its citizens are Muslims, you will have a Muslim democracy. And so it's not an incompatible issue. For others, it is. How am I doing on time?
Go ahead. Just leave it about four more minutes.
There are some political contingencies that I do want to talk about, which are very interesting. And one of the most fascinating things that has happened as a result of the political changes in the Arab world is the Muslim Brotherhood and Nahda find themselves actually in the middle. And for the first time, they are being challenged not just from the left, but also from the right. In the case of Egypt, by the Salafist Noor party, and in the case of Tunisia, by Hizb ut-Tahrir, who is actually outside the political sphere. That is why you see violence. I think if they were included into the election process, there would be less extremist manifestations that you see in Tunisia. But that to me is a very interesting challenge, because if the Muslim Brotherhood was safe on its right, I think it would have expanded more towards the center and to the left. And because now they feel that the right is unfair. If you're watching American politics, Romney says one thing and then half an hour later his aides correct him. It's the Tea Party which comes back and says, no, 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 we are not going to have pre-existing conditions in our plan. So what happens is that the right, as it tries to move to the center, is challenged from the right. And therefore, the Muslim Brotherhood, I think, has not moved to the center as much as it would like to move, because it actually faces, in Egypt especially, a very significant electoral challenge from the Noor party, and countries like Saudi Arabia are not playing a positive role by literally bankrolling these right-wing parties to the tune of hundreds of millions of dollars. So I think that from a political perspective, the fact that the dominant political group find itself in the center is itself very interesting, because thereby it will necessarily take a centrist or moderate position, but it will, I think, retard the theoretical development of a liberal democracy, and people like me would be worried about it. But nevertheless, in the long run, watching American politics, Romney says one thing and then half an hour later his aides correct him. It's the Tea Party which comes back and says, no, 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 we are not going to have pre-existing conditions in our plan. So what happens is that the right, as it tries to move to the center, is challenged from the right. And therefore, the Muslim Brotherhood, I think, has not moved to the center as much as it would like to move, because it actually faces, in Egypt especially, a very significant electoral challenge from the Noor party, and countries like Saudi Arabia are not playing a positive role by literally bankrolling these right-wing parties to the tune of hundreds of millions of dollars. So I think that from a political perspective, the fact that the dominant political group find itself in the center is itself very interesting, because thereby it will necessarily take a centrist or moderate position, but it will, I think, retard the theoretical development of a liberal democracy, and people like me would be worried about it. But nevertheless, in the long run, the sustainability of any of these democratic initiatives, and regardless of what they call it, an Islamic state or Dawlah Madaniyyah, a civil state, etc., is going to be dependent extremely on the extent of economic development that they do. I visited all of these countries afterwards, and I even had a very interesting conversation with Sheikh Rashid al-Ghanouchi about it, and I told him that this euphoria that I sense in Tunisia, that, okay, you have arrived at democracy, well, just think of Pakistan, okay? They had what you have now 40 years ago, and it's not really a great place to think of, not a great model to aspire, especially now that people are in the Arab world now say that Turkey is not really the model that they are going to look at. So just because you have electoral processes does not mean that you're going to have a sustainable, thriving economy which will sustain a democracy where equal citizens are truly treated as equal citizens. Thank you.